Barack Obama was acting as a henchman on behalf of the British Empire. And Barack Obama caused me suffering on behalf of George W. Bush and Tony Blair and Emperor Charles in London. And so Barack Obama put a lot of stress on me that caused me to be less diplomatic than I would have wanted to be. So here is my new statement on Africa-China diplomacy. And this is after I learned that the Chinese had invented the computer, that I climbed down from too much Caucasian belligerence, where I suggested before that India should occupy Madagascar. Now I say China should have a military base and settlers in Madagascar, whereas India should help northern Somalia. India should have a military base in northern Somalia, and Hindi settlers from India should be in northern Somalia. Mogadishu should be part of Ethiopia. And okay, now the big idea here is a large presence of Chinese settlers and a Chinese naval base in Madagascar. Why is that a good idea? The reason why is because that would enhance China-Africa cooperation. And we're not talking about North Africa, because China doesn't really have as much reason to have influence in North Africa. It's actually in south of the Sahara, the nations of Black Africa, with the exception of South Africa. The nations of racially Black African nations could benefit and should benefit from a closer relationship with China. And the ideal place for China to have a presence is in Madagascar. So this is a big idea. There should be millions of Chinese people in Madagascar, just as there are millions of Africans in East Asia. In Papua New Guinea, there should be millions of Chinese in Madagascar. To enhance cooperation between the racially Black nations of Africa and enhance cooperation between them and China and the nations that are racially Chinese, such as Japan, Korea, and Vietnam, among others. So as Caucasian aggression has not subsided, and the future looks like more of the same as we've seen in the last century, China and the racially Black nations of Africa, and also Japan, Korea, Vietnam, among others, the East Asian nations should have a close working relationship with the racially Black nations of Africa. So I suggested the African Union is a regional entity which also includes Caucasian nations such as Egypt and Algeria and Libya and Tunisia and Morocco. And that African Union does not speak for the racially Black nations of Africa, because there are so many Caucasians, so a large population of Caucasians of North Africa, and so that makes it so that the African Union is an entity which is an instrument for the cooperation between Arabs and Africans, and it really isn't an expression of Black African nations and their group, their region as a group of nations. So the racially Black nations should have a treaty and an entity which is their own, apart from the African Union. in addition to the African Union. So the racially black nations of Africa ought to have a new organization, which is an international regional organization, and I don't know what to call it, but that's the ones who should negotiate with the East Asian nations on an East Asian presence of millions in Madagascar. And that would enhance cooperation between Africa and East Asia, the racially black region of Africa and East Asia. So now that's a change in my opinion on China-Africa cooperation after I learned that the credit belongs to the Chinese race, of which Japan is a racially Chinese nation mostly, and so is Korea and Vietnam, among others. They're racially Chinese nations, Taiwan. So the achievement of the invention of the microchip manufacturing process and the transistor belong to those who had the manufacturing sector and the technology and manufacturing and the personnel and all of the scientists and engineers related to those industries to actually achieve that invention. Whereas it was just an idea before the Japanese and Taiwanese actually made it happen, and also their memory chips. So they get the credit because they had the manufacturing that nobody else had to actually create it. They had to find the right elements and put them together, purify the elements, and put them together through the manufacturing process. And they had to combine different manufacturing processes in addition to printing technology and photography technology and microscopy that they merged together to make the microchip. And so the Chinese race gets the credit for inventing the computer because it seems that the British vacuum tube computer, the Colossus, as it was described in the story about their World War II work to decrypt the Enigma machine, that never existed. That was made up after the fact to claim to have invented a general purpose computation machine before the transistor existed. So I'm convinced that the Colossus never existed, and the first computer was made with manufactured transistors individually soldered onto a logic circuit board, or multiple logic circuit boards. Okay, so after I learned that the Chinese invented the computer, then I said, well, I have changed my opinion. I no longer want to recommend that India should occupy Madagascar, and I think that China should have a base in Madagascar. But I had already said that India should intervene in Somalia, and there should be a Hindi settlers and a Indian military base in northern Somalia. And then I amended it, not entire Somalia, because Mogadishu should belong to Ethiopia. So these are some interesting future possibilities. And it should be a good opportunity in Madagascar for China-Africa cooperation. And the African Union shouldn't say anything about it because it should be a decision made by not the African Union, because of the Caucasian nations, which are part of the African Union. It should be a new entity composed of the racially black nations of Africa that will have an agreement with the East Asian nations on East Asian settlers in Madagascar, and in addition to a Chinese Navy base in Madagascar. And I think that the African nations can appreciate the value of uh, Chinese strategic influence from the Chinese military to assist the racially black nations of Africa in forming their sovereignty with China and East Asian partners who are racially Chinese. That's my vision now, because I haven't seen any indications of less less aggression from the Caucasian nations, that they still believe in a world without borders. I think that's a Caucasian ambition. The future vision of a world without borders, I've said, is a bad idea, which is abolishing the sovereignty of nations. And this I compare to a novel in which the author writes into the narrative the death of all the main characters. So if you imagine each nation is one of the characters in a novel, all the nations of the world, the true nations of the world, are characters in a novel, the author writes that all of these characters die and they're replaced with just one global government. And then all future chapters of the novel are about the global government versus the terrorists. And there's no more nations left. There's just one global government, and everybody who disagrees with it is called terrorists. And then the sequel to that novel and all future sequels to that novel are all global government versus terrorists. That's what happens if you abolish the sovereignty of the nations of the world. So I said that the planners of the future should not be like that bad writer who envisions a simplified future of just one global government and those who oppose it being called terrorists. Keep alive all of the characters, all of the main characters who are real nations. Some of them will merge with each other, but there's going to be real nations in each region that are persistent characters into the future. They should be, and they should have national sovereignty, and they should not be pushed around by globalist corporations who have this insane vision of one global government. And it's unnecessary and it's bad for the future. So that's part of my thesis on foreign relations, is the preserving of the sovereignty of nations and the right of nations to require that globalist corporations, international corporations, have to negotiate with each nation, and not merely to have fake negotiations where the nation is begging for the corporation to approve of them, and then the corporation gives a fake approval for a fake reprimand from that government, such as you'll see it happen in various trillion-dollar corporations will say that they have been reprimanded by a national government and they're going to return $700 million or something like that. And those are fake settlements where the nation was not the one who had the idea. It was the corporation who had the idea to pretend that the government had reprimanded them on the handling of data or on how they handle user privacy or something like that. Really, the nations have to stand up and they have to stop taking bribes. That's what it is. It's a bribe that was offered by the corporation to the government, and then they disguised it as if the government had reprimanded the corporation and required of them to pay a fine. It was actually the corporation's idea to pay a bribe to get some new approval that they wanted. So we want to see real regional governmental regulation of international corporations. So restoring sovereignty and not allowing a group of international corporations to abolish all of the national governments and to establish that one global government that defines the future. So anyway, that's part of my thesis on international relations. Most of my writing is in the Russian website VKontakte, and I will hope to organize my ideas and give some more information about historical discoveries which have an effect on future international relations. All right, that's all for this video.